Welcome back, blade fans, to a bit of a different and off the beaten track set of reviews, which I'm going to combine into one. So there's going to be three segments to this review on what you see here. Knives sent to me by Steel City Cutlery. Sorry, I don't have the gentleman's name in all of the correspondence I've had on Instagram. I didn't catch a first name, and I don't see one on his card, which is fine. So, heretofore known as Steel City Cutlery. And there is his business card with his logo. So, that being said, we're going to bring out the first knife, and it looks like I was zoomed in a bit far. So the first knife is what he refers to as his Bowie. And you can see he makes a very decent Kydex sheath. It's nicely finished. It has an ulti clip. And it swallows up about the first quarter of the handle or so, which is good. Retention is good, no rattle. And here we go. Almost dropped it. So he's referring to this as his Bowie. And one thing I will say is that he says his knives are meant to last a lifetime. They're not meant to be things of cosmetic beauty. You can see they're fairly rough hewn. He uses stock removal method on this one, and there's going to be one other I'll show you that is done through the forging process. That's a rebar knife. But some notes on his knives overall. He heat treats by sight and color. And he's been making knives for a very long time, although he is only 30 years old. So I'm not sure how long ago he started. He aims for Rockwell 58 on his knives. And that would mean this Bowie fighter here is in that range. And this is about a $250 knife, I am told. And the steel, if I can find that for you. Well, I may or may not have the exact steel. Okay, it's 1080. So the steel is 1080 on this one, which is a high carbon steel. We have a faceted, looks like G10. And that must be fastened with an adhesive, as I do not see any pins. So we'll go with that. And if he corrects me, I'll certainly add those comments into the finished video. Very nice finger choil. It's comfortable. There is no jimping here. May not be necessary really, because this could be used for an EDC cutting tool. It does come through razor sharp, very aggressive. I do like the edge on these. You can see his belt marks are still there in a rough sense. And on at least one other knife, he says he leaves some of the scaling and some of the surface residue, as these knives do tend to oxidize quickly depending on the environment. So it's he says it's advisable to keep a coating of oil on these. Full tang. It is a great feel. The handle is wide enough so that it makes up for the fact that it isn't too tall, as you can see. We've got some horizontal striations here going the length of the blade. We got a nice little clip which is sharpened quite as well as the main edge. And these are really developed to be tough tactical, defensive, fighting, self-defense knives. But I do see this one with the ability to do more than that. So if you're carrying this and you need to do some EDC cutting chores, that definitely should handle it. I like the edge he's putting on these. The blade comes down to a fine edge, even though you've got some pretty decent stock. So let's talk about some specifics in terms of measurements. So the overall length is almost 9 inches on this one. I'm going to call it like 8.9. The blade, I'm really going to measure the blade to the plunge grind there. I'm going to call it about 4.7. It's obviously longer than that if you go all the way back to the handle. The blade in millimeters is almost 4 millimeters. In fact, let's call that 4 millimeters. And, well, yep, 0.15. And I'll try to get the fattest portion of the handle for you, 0.62. We have a weight by itself without the sheath of 4.42, call it 4.43 ounces. So for a fixed blade of 9-inch length, it is light and it is responsive. Now, Steel City has been practicing blade arts and martial arts for quite some time, so all of his knives are built around his knowledge of knife fighting. Let's call it knife fighting, right? Knife arts, blade arts, combative arts. I believe he does, you're going to see the next two knives are going to be point down oriented knives. So he does have a background in Libre fighting arts, as I understand it. I really do like the fact that he sharpened the swedge on this, so it's not a swedge, it's really a sharpened upper edge, and comes to a quite a fine point. See if we can see that a little better. Get it into the light. Pretty fine, pretty fine. There we go. Pretty fine. I got to be careful I don't cut myself. So a very piercy point. Almost a shoot knife look to the configuration of this. Again, we're not looking for a pretty knife here. We're looking for a dependable knife that you can stake your life on. Now let's take a look at the sheath once more. Got 2 screws here holding the ulti-clip on. Got some grommets, 3 grommets, and looks like that can be shifted a little bit, mounted a little higher or lower, and nice retention, no problems there. And it exits the sheath quite nicely as well. So 4 millimeter, nice thick blade stock, plenty to hang on to, just enough handle. Now what this reminds me of, and you may be jumping ahead to know what I'm going to show here, is the choil on the Street Beat, Spyderco Street Beat, a Fred Perrin design. And obviously Fred Perrin's had some influence, I would say, here. Although we've got a much shorter blade on the Street Beat. It's only a 3.5 inch blade. So if I did happen to, let's see, that stuff on top of stuff here. If I did go the full length right to the handle, it's like 5 1/4. If you need that to the place where your finger is, the full blade is 5 inches. So that is why it's significantly longer than the street beat. And some nice swag here. Stickers that Steel City sent. There you go. And that's his business card, which you can freeze frame on if you need his contact info. And I think I got one more little sticker here. There we go. All right. So there's our parting shot. That is the Steel City Bowie. And might be something you're interested in. You want a good tough knife that he stands behind. You want it for tactical use primarily. Here you go. Now, that's the first knife, and we will be segueing into a video on the second knife. It'll be a little shorter because I've got most of the explanation about Steel City out of the way. Stay tuned. Hey there, blade fans. We're back with the second segment of a review of 3 Steel City Cutlery knives. And there's a nice sticker given to me by Steel City. So, number 2, we have another interesting knife. Just so happens I moved it off the table. So this is interesting by virtue of the fact, and I think we're going to need to, pardon me while I amp the exposure up just a bit here. I think maybe, sorry to do this in mid-vid. There we go. I think that'll be a little better. Interesting thing about this one, same quality Kydex sheath, pretty nice, well done, and a good fit. Now, what you're going to see on this one is some carbon scaling that was left there intentionally, according to the maker, in order to safeguard it against the against rusting, because it is a high carbon steel and obviously subject to rust. Came through with just a tiny little bit of rust right on the exposed edge, so you can see that the rest of the knife is protected from that because I'm not seeing any rust on the rest of it. So what we've got here is a dedicated pakal or pikal knife. Looks like I've got to keep zooming back. Okay, I think that'll do it. Designed for either the Libre fighting system or Filipino martial arts pakal, pikal. It's lined up very nicely for point down in that it curves just slightly so that it's following the arc of the arm. That's an important thing. Now, some people will curve the point in too much, which means it's good for a straight down movement, but it's not good for that broad arcing movement and then pulling. Unlike some other dedicated pikal knives, this one has a sharpened swedge about halfway down, maybe a third of the way down the entire blade. We are dealing with about the same blade stock, I believe, as the Bowie that I showed you earlier. Coming in 0.15 and 4 millimeters, 4.1. So this one has been forged out of a piece of rebar, and let me just get my notes here. He told me the type of rebar. So it's Schedule 90 rebar, and he said it's tough enough to eat drill bits. And he came by it accidentally. I don't know if it showed up in his tire like I had happen one day or not. I'll tell you about that story sometime, going down the highway and hitting a piece of loose rebar in the groove between pavements. Anyway. We've got this one that is wrapped in kind of a Japanese manner with looks like paracord or some type of fabric cord, and then epoxied into place, which is a very good way to give you traction. You're not going to slip. Of course, you can lock your thumb over the pommel of this knife And that is pretty much its dedicated purpose. It's not going to be a carving knife, although you could probably get it to do that in a pinch. All of his knives are aggressively sharpened with micro teeth. So this thing will rip and it will cut without a lot of effort whatsoever. And it's actually the type of edge I prefer and like to put on my knives, is to get those micro serrations. You want to learn more about that, by the way, take a stop by the Neve's Knives channel, and he will tell you all kinds of stuff about what's going on with edges and different types of edges. So basically a forged bar of rebar, nicely sized to fit the hand, and definitely do the job as a self-defense knife in a pinch. Something you can, with this scabbard, carry on a daily basis. Nice fit, again, snug fit, no rattle, and it's got some nice drag on the way out, which lets you know that it's not a single point where it locks in, but it locks in pretty much along the length of the blade. And do you need to worry about scratches on this blade? Certainly not. One of the advantages of having a rough-hewn blade. So there's the Ulti-Clip, which Steel City seems to prefer. And as far as pricing on that one goes, I think we're talking, let's see, I'm looking through my notes from him. The rebar blade is $200, the Bowie was $250, and then we will next get to the Fang, so stay tuned. So here we now have what the maker has termed the Fang. This reminds me most of the clinch pick that I know it's Greg, and somebody will probably tell me, but formerly known as South Narc, and his system of using knives for handgun retention and close quarters where you can't use a handgun, and in a car where you cannot use a handgun. Once again, we have a dedicated point down, edge in knife, very, very sharp and aggressive, with a thick, probably going to be 4 millimeters. No, 3.5 on this one. Still pretty substantial when you consider how the thickness of the steel has been carried out to the point. We have G10 applied to the sides. Looks like I'm seeing evidence of at least one pin there. Might be, or might just be a light spot. No, it looks like a pin of G10, a single pin to hold those handles on, and that's a good way to go, rather than rely entirely on some form of adhesive. Now, the way this guy works is that it was going to seem as though you don't have anything to hold on to, but this rounded profile of the handle is meant to fit into the hollow of the palm. So it goes no further. You can ram this thing as hard as you want and it's going to stay in the palm. It's not going to slip out because, you know, the end of it hasn't even seen an opening. I mean, you're completely covering that over. It's nicely contoured for the purpose, having this kind of S shape to it. So you can choke up fairly close. You can back up just a little bit. And either way, there is your point down, edge in, perfectly aligned 90 degrees with the edge of the hand. And again, he's calling this the Fang. And we'll see if I can get you the type of steel being used if it's given. Could be the same steel. He does harden these to 58 Rockwell. I think I mentioned that before. I'm not sure I have the steel on the Fang. If it's the same as the Bowie, then that would make sense. And I believe I gave that a bit earlier. 1080 steel. So let's assume this is 1080 steel. Certainly Steel City can chime in and make any corrections to any misspoken facts that I've given in this review. So the Fang, we have the Fang, a dedicated Pikal knife. We have this rebar knife, a little larger, with more handle, with full handle's width. And we have the Bowie. And probably if I back out, you could actually see those. There we go. So we have the Bowie on the top, the largest of the group. Here for comparison is the Spyderco Street Bowie. Is it a Street Bowie? And let's bring them down a little bit. Urban Bowie. Is it Urban Bowie or Street Bowie? Why do I forget now? Well, you'll correct me if I'm wrong. A lot of Spyderco knives these days. Another comparison. Here is a TKL knife. And that's the Guardian. That's a pretty wicked knife with 3 sharpened edges and a nickel boron finish. I think at least about a 4mm blade stock. These nice bullet style G10 multi-layered handles. Tim Kell's doing hell of a job knocking it out of the park these days with his work. Lots of models. Also very wickedly sharp on his blades as well. And I think Tim's are coming in, just coming in somewhere around 200. So pretty much the same ballpark money here, from about 200 to 250 on these knives. None of them are below 200 as far as I know. Tim also does a nice Kydex sheath with a flexible belt, horizontal belt clip. Nicely done. So that is Steel City. Hope you enjoyed the video, and thank you very much to Steel City for trusting me with his handiwork. And again, if you need the info on Steel City, let's see if I can get a card for you real quick. Okay, coming back at you. There's how to get a hold of Steel City if you're interested in any of these blades or have questions for him. He also has a presence on Instagram. I'll be sure that all of that goes up in the comments. For now, this old sword signing off. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe.